Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Ripley Radio. We have a lot of weird stuff today. First new episode in quite a while because we've had a nice long summer. But folks, it has been exactly 2 years since the old Ripley Radio show was revived.
Yeah.
And what a better way to celebrate. Yeah, woo! What a better way to celebrate than to talk with a man who actually worked on the original Ripley Radio show with some guy named Robert Ripley. So that's going to be one of our guests today,
Yes.
Believe it or not. That's going to be cool. Now, let's go around the table and introduce everybody. My name is Ralph with an F, and we have Mr. Tim O'Brien, our producer.
Hi, Ralph. Good to be back. Great summer. Woo. Everybody had fun, I hope.
Edward Meyer.
Hey,
How
good
are
to
you?
be back. 2 years. I can't believe that.
We've been doing this for 2 years, reviving that radio show, just giving it a couple of chest bumps, and boom, boom, the heart started beating again.
And how many shows in total, Tim?
6,390.
Fantastic.
As Tim O'Brien and I know, it's an amazing honor to be in our seat here talking on a show that's called Ripley Radio, which, of course, was started by some guy named Robert Ripley. But here's a special guest. Believe it or not, we have somebody that worked with Robert Ripley on the original Ripley Radio show. Fred Essex is our guest. Fred, welcome to this version of Ripley Radio. How are you?
Well, by golly, it's great to talk with someone who is still interested in Ripley, because when you think of the number of decades that have passed, that man certainly has longevity.
We deal with the world of Ripley every day, and to me it's amazing to think that one man, 60 years later, is still providing jobs in an industry that's multi-million dollars. It's amazing. Now, when you were working with Robert Ripley on the old Ripley Radio show, explain how that worked. You were part of an ad agency, and the show was only 15 minutes, and what was your role in that?
Well, let's back up for a minute. In those days, the ad agencies controlled all the programs on the networks. The ad agency was sold the program, and they in turn, I was with Rudolph and Ryan, they sold it to American Cigarette and Cigar for Pell Mill Cigarettes. In those days, a 15-minute format daily was the common thing. Remember, Amos and Andy was on for 15 minutes every day on the old Blue Network, which, of course, today is ABC. And Bob Ripley, therefore, was on a 15-minute show Monday through Friday. And so we had quite an audience, and I was assigned to direct the show, put it all together, all the way from the casting to the actual throwing the cues to the actors, and then preparing the next day at Rip's Central Park West home. So we were quite involved with him, Ralph. He was a good businessman. Remember, he used to be a sports cartoonist, so a sports figure. So he was easy to work with. He knew his work. He knew my responsibility. If I had suggestions, he knew that he was the actor, but he listened to the director, so I never had any problem with him. In fact, a couple of things that he gave me as mementos sort of reflect a very, very good man.
Robert Ripley had buck teeth, and that affected the way he talked, didn't it, on radio?
Yes, and it sort of presented a bit of a lisp. So I remember one time when I told him we had to cut down his lines, and told him the reasons why, and he didn't object to that at all. Now, remember, people had this great image, and still do, of that man. And suddenly you hear somebody on there who's starting to lisp. It just completely killed the character as far as the ear was concerned.
You said you got a memento from him.
After the series concluded, he had sort of a little get-together for the people who worked daily with him. And the man gave me a Mediterranean spice grinder, of all things, that he had a sense of humor, and he had written out and then had an engraver engrave in his handwriting to Fred Essex a reminder of the daily grind, signed Ripley. So these are nice things to have.
What would be the signature moment you could remember that made you, maybe like the story that you tell everybody? What's the one story you tell?
Well, I like to tell stories about different actual dramatizations of one of his, believe it or not, facts. the doctor and this nurse walking down a hall in a hospital after World War One, and from their dialogue, we could find out that they were in a hospital for people who were shell-shocked, who had lost all memory. And from their dialogue, they even were saying that this particular man, they didn't think they had any hope for him to recover his memory. So they're in there with him, and he would talk with them, recognize them, but he knew nothing of what had happened before. There was a little radio on his table, and they turned it on because they thought the music would be soothing, and it was playing "Come to Me, My Melancholy Baby." Suddenly the man sat up, leaned forward in his bed, and said, "I wrote that." It turned out that his memory came back, and he was on our show as a guest.
That was awesome. That's just exactly what we wanted, Fred.
Well, Rip didn't just end at 15 minutes after the show went off the air. Someone came out with an easel, and he would draw in charcoal the picture of this woman and tell a story about her and what have you. It was very interesting. The people were engrossed. Then an assistant would come out and tear off the big piece of paper, and Rip would explain that he's taking it back to fix it so the charcoal wouldn't come off. Well, he had done one the day before, and that one was already dry, so he rolled it up, and the assistant came out with it. Then Ripley chose somebody who was utterly delighted as he would give them that gift. But we would get together in the morning to go over everything that might be happening that day. Then in the afternoon we would have our live rehearsal, because in those days everything was live. And then of course the show went on in the evening.
Well, believe it or not, that's all true. Absolutely true. Well, thank you so much, Fred Essex, for being a guest on this version of the Ripley Radio Show, going back to one of the first versions of the Ripley Radio Show. Our guest on Ripley Radio. You're listening to Ripley Radio. It's an on-demand oddcast. You can find us at webtalkradio.net. Maybe you found us at ripleyoddcast.com. You can send us any questions or email us radio@ripleys.com.